Now let's get started with today's presentation. Today, we have the amazing opportunity to hear from a panel of esteemed executives who have seen it all from localities that span the globe. Live on the headliner stage, this panel will share their firsthand observations and real-world experiences in a dynamic discussion meant to proactively tackle the questions and challenges of today's complex technology landscape and how to prepare for the global traveler coming to your property. Here to moderate this panel are Frank Wolf, HFTP's CEO, and Sherry Merrick, principal of Aiken Street. Both are inductees to the HFTP Technology Hall of Fame, by the way. And I'd like to ask both of them to the stage along with this morning's panelists, please. Good morning. Good morning. And so, over to you, Mr. Wolf.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I guess you should thank your lucky stars that we're not in the airport. If you haven't seen the news, there are 2,000 flights in and out of the U.S. that have been canceled. It's a mess out there. So at least we're not sleeping on the airplane floor this morning. The panelists are going to go ahead and come up, if they would. We're going to ask them to come up and join us on stage. And in just a second, we will have them introduce themselves as we all get situated here this morning. Yeah, we have a great, when we put this panel together, we wanted to try our best to represent the entire globe. So we have quite a large but esteemed panel, and we do encourage at the end, we're going to try to save some time for the audience to go ahead and maybe have some questions of your own. So we'll start with Michael Levy, and we'll come down the row. Michael, will you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us about yourself, and also what part of the world that you've been working in lately?
Michael Levy, an operational hotelier that loves tech. I've been involved with HFTP for many, many moons. Work mostly out of Europe right now, active in the Middle East, and a little bit in the States.
Todd?
Hey, my name's Todd Wood, and I am a technology hotelier that loves operations.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm with Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group, Vice President of Transformation, and so we have properties all over the world, and I look forward to discussing some of our challenges and opportunities.
Barrett Patel, I'm the chairman of AHOA, the Asian American Hotel Owners Association, the largest hotels association in the world. I proudly represent 20,000 members that own over 30,000 hotels. I'm myself a hotel owner-operator. I've been in the business since the late 1980s, and happy to be here and represent hotel owners.
Morning, everyone. My name is Sanovnik Destang. I am from the beautiful island of St. Lucia, and I am the executive director for Bay Gardens Resorts and also the first vice president for the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, which I'm very proud to say has the largest delegation that we've ever had, perhaps from the Caribbean, through our partnership with HFTP. Unfortunately, a few of them were affected by the weather, but we've still got about 15 to 16 strong. A lot of them are in the front row. They're going to make some noise, our people from the Caribbean. And I am absolutely not a tech person. I'm a chartered accountant by profession. I lived and worked right here in Toronto, worked at KPMG, right at Commerce Court West around the corner. So I am thrilled to bits to be back in my second home in Toronto, and pleased to be here and pleased to share some of our challenges and opportunities in the Caribbean with you.
Great, quite an introduction. Hi, morning all. I'm Amandeep Sarna. About 25 years in tech field, and over the last decade, had the opportunity of driving some large-scale tech-led enterprise transformation projects across the globe. Last 1 year or so, working with Indian-based company ITC Hotels, who happen to be the world's largest LEED Platinum certified hotel chain with about 22 of our hotels out of 115 plus with that top honor. And happy to be here after a couple of years, and great to be part of the prestigious group. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Tariq Valani. So I actually recently took on leading Fairmont technology globally. I'm part of a lovely team that's also here from Accor, come out in numbers to support us today. And so, yeah, with 5,500 hotels in the Accor portfolio, Fairmont makes up a smaller number of that, but, you know, in the luxury segment. And looking forward to see where we go with Fairmont technology in the future.
Very good. Shall we sit? Sherry, you want to get us started?
Well, good morning. So one of our first questions, we came up with a list of quite extensive questions, and hopefully we get to quite a few of them. So my first question for the panel is, as an international traveler yourself, what do you think are the pain points for our industry, and how can we leverage technology to eliminate some of these pain points?
Is that to the group?
Michael, did you want to?
Well, I think, I don't know which pain point to pick, because there are a few. But in reality, I think that if we look at the hospitality, we're lagging behind in the digital journey of every other vertical. And we're just not getting our arms around it. And I think that pre-COVID, it was mostly niceties to have. And today, it's a must-have. If you just simply cannot keep up with it, it's going to cost you loyalty. And there's nothing that can overcome that. So I think that we're on serious. We need to improve. And I think that over the past 2 years, there's quite a bit of, I would say, technology that is capable of solving the architectural issues that we have. And people are starting to adapt that. So I think we're making progress, but we're forced with our backs to the wall. It's a little bit embarrassing that we're so late to the game, and there's a lot of catching up to do.
Great.
So I think if I can add to that, so it's the, let's say, the technology today that we all have access to in our homes, and it's the age-old problem. You know, it's accelerating at such a rapid pace, and as hotels, we need to keep up. So, you know, you travel for work, you spend many nights away in a hotel, you travel with your family on holiday, and you expect to have the same or better. So the expectation is there. Can we keep up is the question. And, you know, there was the whole, let's say, basic comparison to say that when you're in a hotel, you know, it's the bed first, and then it's the shower, and it's the Wi-Fi. But maybe it's the Wi-Fi first now. You know, and when you don't get that right as a basic, that's kind of like the core plumbing of what we're doing. And so things like this, I think, are pain points that we actually need to resolve, get to the basics. And one of the things that the operations always says is that as tech, do what you want, but it has to work. And that's the key.
Great.
Yeah.
So now, Vic, this one's for you, because I know this is near and dear to your heart, and also, you know, we keep talking in the industry about labor and how labor is so short today. But my question to you is, how can we try to future-proof ourselves to address the importance of the human resource element, training, leveraging for the next generation?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a critical part of it, because the Caribbean, I'm not sure if many of you are aware, was actually the fastest to recover from COVID. I mean, by 2022, we were pretty much at the same level as we were in 2019 in terms of arrivals. So we were the fastest recovering segment of the world in international travel. But I think two things are going to allow us to sustain that long term. One is how we adapt and embrace new technologies. And two is how we embrace our employees and how we embrace the human resource element. And I think when it comes to future-proofing yourself, you have to make sure that you have a culture within your organization that encourages innovation, that encourages people to take chances, to take risks, and to adopt and to try out the new technologies. For example, if you go way back to the late 2000s, we were a very, very early adopter as a small company of social media. When people were not sure what to do with Facebook and what it meant, we said, we're going to try this, we're going to figure it out. And that certainly allowed us to do very well in terms of direct bookings, which now make up the majority of our business. In terms of new technologies, artificial intelligence is on everyone's minds. And I think you need to allow your employees, within reason, of course, to try out the new technologies, try out ChatGPT, and be at conferences like this. I think just being here, you're showing that you're very serious about future-proofing yourself. I mean, if you listen to the headliner session yesterday, it's very, very clear that artificial intelligence is not going anywhere. And at the HSMAI sessions, it's also very clear that it's going to change the world of search. Google's generative AI, which apparently is not even available fully in Canada and outside of the United States yet, is really going to be a game changer. And having a direct first, I hope there are no OTAs in the room. Please don't feel offended. We love the OTA business. In the Caribbean, long-haul destinations, we need third parties, of course. But I think for us, having a direct is best approach has allowed us to be adaptive. It's easy just to give the business to the OTAs and the tour operators when you're in a long-haul travel destination like the Caribbean. There's no innovation involved in that. But having a direct is best approach means that you have to adopt best practices in terms of website development, in terms of mobile development, in terms of social media, and now in terms of artificial intelligence. Because again, you adapt these technologies to get more direct link to the consumer and get more direct bookings to your website. So those are some of the things I think have allowed us to future-proof ourselves, but we certainly have a long way to go as an industry in the Caribbean and worldwide. Hospitality, I think it was last year in Orlando, I saw a panel or a study that showed that hospitality is just above the construction sector in terms of technology adoption. So we have a long way to go as an industry globally when it comes to that, but certainly in the Caribbean. I hope that answered the question to some extent.
Good. Michael?
Yeah, I think that I'm part of a fantastic initiative out of Dubai, whereby there's going to be an online learning platform, and that's not so unusual because they have been out there, but this is based on artificial intelligence with a VR layer, without goggles, so that we can actually start building a curriculum that will be certified as well by the big hotel schools, whereby the learning goes away from, let's say, 4 years bachelor's and a master's, but allow everybody in our industry to take courses for a week or a month, get accredited, grow. It's a process that I think is facilitated through technology, because otherwise we could not get it done. But it will allow the 85% of our working population in the hospitality industry that have not been privileged to education take on serious courses, and they're going to be done at an entry level, at a managerial level, but also at an exec level. And it is the subject matter experts out of the industry that, guided by academic professors, will be able to get this curriculum relatively fast together. And we're very excited, and that I think is needed for progress for the employees, for re-engagement, and also for advancement. So it's one of those tech-enabled opportunities that we're trying to bring bear.
Anybody else?
Okay.
Sherry?
So another question, I was looking forward to asking this question. How are you using data and analytics to anticipate the needs of the traveler and provide a more seamless experience? Are you getting the information you need from your vendors? And what, if not, what's lacking? Amandeep, did you want to start there?
Yeah, in terms of, it's always been a true dream for any hotelier to have that true customer golden 360. We've been trying for years, and it's unfortunate that even in today's day and age, it's still like a distant dream to have that true golden record for entire customer base. But it's come a long way. In fact, we are working on a couple of projects where we do integrate and ingest data from all the touch points, what we have, to create that dream of the customer 360. And there are a host of companies and startups which have started, kind of enabling hotel chains like ours, to convert that dream into reality. Of course, challenges do exist to kind of integrate them with the legacy systems which you can't live without, right? So we are getting there, and the challenge is, of course, kind of to double up the challenge now with the entire data privacy laws getting more and more stringent. The entire effort what the hotel chains have been putting in the last decade or so in creating that golden record and to be able to use it to provide that next-gen seamless, customized experience is becoming a very fine line of how we use the data. So that's a tricky one, but yes, technology does exist, and I think the support which one does look forward from the partners is how we can integrate multiple applications seamlessly, because that's, I think, the biggest bottleneck today. And of course, in terms of the regulations, it's how you educate the customer of what sort of data you hold and how you use that data, and of course, how secure that data is with you, and then utilize that for that personalized experience.
Just a little bit about data and how important it is. Data is more valuable now than oil. And so as an owner-operator, our concern is whether it's the reservations that come from the brands or if it comes from online travel agents, what data can we own and what data can we utilize? Because, for example, I was just with someone and they were talking about they want to be near their gym, like the same floor or one below, whatever, right? Is that privacy? You follow what I mean? Whereas on other items, they might be considered privacy. And so laws rarely keep up with technology, and we're not early adopters, but we're not technology experts. But technology is here, and the convenience factor of this, when we're flying on an airplane, I can switch my seat. Do I want Comfort Plus? Do I want the aisle, the window? Those have to be available. And my fear is that a lot of hotel chains are not planning for future-proofing for the future, because you got to take a quantum leap forward. And the best thing I can come up with is, many nations around the world skipped hard lines, unlike America, and they went switched to cell phones. Everybody could afford one or two of these. Whereas in the States, we graduated to that. So I'm hoping that hotel chains, whatever, they're investing tens of millions of dollars, some hundreds of millions of dollars. They've got to go and take a quantum leap into this century, but into the next level, and be sure that it's what is best for the guest, the consumer, but also with the hotel operator.
Yeah. And one thing we've been working on for over 15 years, working on consolidating the customer 360 view and just understanding is John Smith, the same John Smith that stayed with us in New York and now is staying in Hong Kong. And we did that without having any guest number that the guest knew. Now, recently, we've added the ability to add that number, but we still focus on how do we know who a guest is? Well, that's very difficult. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of matching and merging. And historically, and even today, what a lot of people are doing with that is bringing in data from different systems, bringing it together in a CDP, we call it, Customer Data Platform these days in many cases, and then using that to activate to market and find segments and market to the right people. And that's helpful from a marketing standpoint, but not so helpful from a guest service standpoint. And really understanding that individual. It helps to understand segments because the data is not perfect, but it's close enough to market. And so we've really focused on, or are focusing on, bringing the data together from the room system and making sure we know at point of presence when you're checking somebody in that you actually know it's the same guest and you can greet them because you know they've spent a lot of time in New York. And again, now they're in Hong Kong. But then we need to add in information from the food and beverage systems, from the spa systems, from the concierge systems. And every time you add a system on that, it gets much more complicated. And so we worked very hard on that. But then even when you have that information, the question is, how are you going to use it? How are you going to use that to serve a guest? And that's the most important piece, that the information that you need at the point where you're serving that guest is available to that colleague so they can utilize it, or to the digital touch point if it's a digital touch point. One of the things we like to say is, we've got all this information, we're bringing it together, we're continuing to make it more accurate so it can be used. And today we've got, I know everybody's heard the concept next best action, next best offer, which is great, and that works very well in a digital environment where somebody's interacting directly with the digital world. But what if they're talking to a colleague? How does a colleague have the information? They have to have some way to get the information, and it's got to be relevant. And we like to call that, how do we deliver the next best insight to a colleague. So the colleague can use that information to actually serve a guest, not just an offer for a spa appointment or something like that. Give them information and they can really enrich the experience.
Just, I guess kind of a follow-up, and this is, in all fairness to the panel, wasn't anything that we discussed, but Todd, with that, or any of the panelists, and maybe you also can't talk about this, but is anybody thinking us going to wearable technology that signals some kind of signal to the colleague that says, near field technology? You're standing in front of a diamond or a black card from Almond or whoever to give them some kind of an alert.
Yeah. So we're implementing a technology we're calling Follow Me. So if any of our executives or somebody who's a host for a specific guest wants to know, did they just make a reservation? Did they just book a spa appointment? Did they, have they just shown up in the restaurant? So we're implementing that so that we can then follow up and greet the guest and understand what the guest's doing, see if we might be able to help out for some of our top guests with any other items they might need or want. The challenge is exactly that. We don't really want to put in beaconing, so we're starting with more just let the front desk, when they first start to check in somebody, click a button instead of waiting until they finish checking in, and then the alert goes out to the general manager to come greet the guest. Well, now the guest is going to their room. If you can alert them right when the guest arrives, then it's a great way that they've got time to get there and greet the guest. But I'd love to hear from some of the other panel members of what you're using from a technology standpoint. We've decided not to put that in yet, but very interested.
Michael?
Frank, I think it is, the technology is available to do many things. The problem is that over time we have done so many workarounds in our systems that to move towards the next generation, and there's different levels. There's at the highest level enterprise systems, there's fantastic middleware right now, there's even some platform systems out there that will provide you the plumbing to get the data in one place and to get it clean and actionable. But I think what we need to do is, in order to transition there's a lot of crap that needs to be cleaned up. And we as hoteliers need to understand that unless we untangle that ball, we don't go to the next level. And there is so much available right now. So these CDPs, fantastic. If they're not actionable, then they're no good. So I think that you need to really take a deep dive into middleware platform or, at the highest level, the enterprise systems, and they're very few. So it's a very select group. It's a very few that are out there. They're all here at HITEC, so that's good. But I think that is what we need to look at, is we need to realize that unless we clean up the basement and clean it out altogether and start anew, we're not going to get there. Once you're there, you can get real clean data. You have a guest profile that has a couple of hundred fields in there, and then you can have a normal digital engagement like retail has, like the airlines have, like banking has. We're just not there, and we're not willing to make that quantum leap because it's so difficult to untangle. So it's a project, outsource the project, but get to the next level. That's my advice.
Yes, sir.
I think, to answer your question on the wearables part, I think all of us have tried everything short of slipping an air tag when the guest checks in, just to trace that guest wherever they walk around. But I think that technology, what we have seen in terms of starting off with the RFIDs, then beaconing, et cetera, facial recognition seems to be most promising, depending on the local laws, whether they permit you to do that or not, because that causes the least amount of an interference between the shop floor guy and the guest. We did try the Google Glass as well, when in the early inception, it, of course, wasn't commercially available. But there's always a hindrance. You're wearing some item or, wearing a band or something to identify the guest. It never really worked. It was always that you lost that eye contact, that personalization just wasn't there. But with facial recognition and, with fused in with the CCTV across the hotel, that seems promising to raise and lure the guest is coming there, and you can kind of push the information required for the shop floor executives to be able to service the customer better.
I think there's one thing that we have to bear in mind for certain destinations. You know, with the deprecation of third-party cookies by Google in sometime next year, I believe, emails are going to be like gold. I mean, if you don't have the guest email address, you will not be able to market to them the way that you do now. One of the problems that we face in our part of the world is that more than half of the business, in the case of some hotels, 70–80% of the business comes through third parties, tour operators and OTAs who don't want to share that kind of information with you before the guest checks in. And I think that we really need to find a way to get over that. There are some tour operators who will do it and who will provide you the email address. But I wish that we could find a way to get out of their heads that if we give them the email address, well, they're going to steal my client. Well, that's going to happen at some point anyway, if you know, when they check in. And I think that if we're able to get that information, it helps both parties because we're able to service that customer that much better and really customize their stay when they are there. So that is one of the challenges. And I think it's something people have to bear in mind that, I mean, by 2024, 2025, if you're not able to get that customer's email address, you will not be able to market to them. You'll not be able to even analyze the ROI on your marketing the way that you do right now.
I'd like to, just one quick thing to build off of your comment for for our suppliers and partners in the room. When Synovik says email, he might mean phone number if you're in a different part of the world, or WhatsApp or something. But so just think about it. We definitely have to have the way to market to them. In some parts of the world, that's a phone number. In some parts, it's email.
And thankfully, I think some of the OTAs have started showing the phone number along with the booking, so that kind of takes care of the issue to a certain extent.
With some
the OTAs, where they push the booking, that comes with the mobile number.
With the mobile number,
Yeah.
but the traditional tour operators in the UK, British Airways, Virgin Holidays,
Muscat, yeah.
very much so.
But maybe HITEC is downstairs and is more focused on the distribution question. But I truly believe it doesn't matter how much you need to spend on the first time acquiring the client. Once the client is with you, the guest is with you, you get the opportunity to do
Market to them,
anything and everything you want. And again, if you use the right middleware and the right systems, there are many ways to do that matching. And I think that we are not, at least I should speak for myself, are not technical enough to understand really the depth that they go in. But what they bring together in data right now in order to do the right matching is way beyond the simplicity that we have up here. So I would really advise everybody, take a deep dive in there because the systems and the solutions are out there. It's just we need to be willing to make that quantum leap and walk away from the architectural mess and all the workarounds that we have created and then get to the promised land.
So just to sort of segue on this, I want to talk about streamlining check-in. So, you know, you guys know that, whatever, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, Disney, you're using the bands. The cruise lines are using facial recognition to check in. You know, you just sort of walk through. You don't even check in. How do you see, or do you see facial recognition coming in? Or how do you see us streamlining our check-in and check-out, that little bit of pain, not pain point, but if that could be streamlined, what technology do you see coming in to help you?
So if I may, I think that before we even look at the technology, we need to look at the legislation or the laws. You've got so many different points of concern. So for example, in some countries you need to ask for identification, in others you don't. And then you've got, you know, with facial recognition probably being the easiest way to go from one angle. Once you implement that, how do you get the actual right to use that information? And how do you get that initial image in order to be able to recognize the guest? So I think it comes back to all the discussions we've been having. And I think what underpins the platform, the middleware, and everything else is what is your guest journey? What are you defining? What is it that you want to achieve? Because you can have all the data in the world, but if you don't have the strategy, I think it's of no use. And so I think, and it's to the airline question as well, and how they use technology. What are our guests getting out of giving us that data? And there's always a transactional relationship there to say, I'll give you this, but what am I getting in return? And I think what we need to look at is saying, okay, how do I get that initial image while informing you that giving me this image allows me to serve you better? And how will it allow me to serve you better? And that's when you can start to say, okay, which countries can I have this frictionless check-in, right? And then there's the next question, and let's say if I look at it from the two perspectives, the luxury and the non-luxury. Going back to the headliner session yesterday with Sean, do we really want to push the frictionless every single time? If you're going to a luxury property, is it about meeting someone face to face, receiving that personalized care? Or is it just being recognized by a camera and being able to walk to your room? It depends, right? So understanding also what guest wants, what kind of an experience is a very important part as well before even going to that technology.
So Sherry, I was going to say, it's the hassle factor, right? How much data are you willing to share? What are you willing to give up? So Atlanta Airport, flying out of there a lot. Sky Digital ID sometimes is quicker than Clear, which I have that too, and TSA PreCheck. So you have 3 options. I picked the least hassle-free option. So in the hotel business, like I said, there's the human factor, right? And so when you're on vacation, leisure is different than when you're on business. And nowadays we meld both. So, what does the guest want? And so you should be able to opt out. And again, it goes to the phone where, you can be upgraded to a Comfort Plus, but it won't be a window or an aisle. Are you willing to take it? So that's optionable on an app right now. So what does the future hold for hotels, right? And literally some airlines now you can pick the row and even the individual seat will be a different price. So is that where we're going to go with in the hotel business? Because, we're leaving revenue on the table. And then the hassle factor, that's the really...
We talked earlier about a little bit about legislation. We've talked a little bit here about legislation. So, Bharat, you are as a representative of BAHOA, you have a chance now representing the largest hotels owners actually you were at the White House last week with Modi. So what do you see legislatively coming down, if anything, related to cybersecurity? Is there things that from a technology point of view that are going to be earth-shattering to us? Should we be concerned that there's something?
So I think there's multiple things. In the past, last year, there was legislation talking about cyberware and or threats. Cyber threats there was a bill, and what they were asking businesses to do, and these are really large corporations, was, and remember there was a hack by someone, the IHG hack. There are a lot of hotel brands, like if you're being ransomware, how much did you pay, and did it happen? Right? That's all the legislation said. And that was because the United States government wanted to know what was going on in that sphere, not just for our industry, hotel industry, but all industries, right? It didn't get very far, but I feel it will get further and further, because interestingly, you were saying about the previous week, I was just trying to brush up on things. I watched the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, was giving testimony, and he said for every single FBI agent he has, China has 50 hackers. Right? And he specifically mentioned China at this time, and that's part of the reason probably the Prime Minister of India was invited to the White House in an official state dinner. So what I'm saying, though, just think about that number, right? And so not only China, but other countries around, there are threats. Now, it could be for all different kinds of verticals, government, industries, utilities, but I just heard about on the news this morning, Petro-Canada, the rewards app. So I buy gas every other day or whatever. Now, I can't use my rewards app. That's going to be a pain point. And what if that's in the hotel industry? I can't get gas, or I can get gas, but I can only get gas for cash. Now, since COVID, I haven't used cash much. I've used this a lot more. I don't even have change. I can't remember the last time I put change in my pocket. So as we're getting to this kind of platform, whether you're staying at a hotel, flying on a plane, or whatever else you're doing, what does that say if it's been hacked? Right? I mean, my kids don't know don't know how to use a typewriter, correct? But they do know, and they'd probably be looking for how to plug it in if they had a typewriter, right? So, what's going to happen going in the future? So there's definitely going to be legislation. That's one piece. The second piece is really as an owner-operator, what the hotel chain is asking from us. This all comes to privacy and data. Who owns the privacy and data? And then how do I, as a hotel owner-operator, get reimbursed? There's a bill in New Jersey that's talking a little bit about that, but there's definitely going to be legislation. It's kind of like, what is the shape and size and kind of it? And for us, we're focused on, definitely focused on profitability, right? And we see technology is leading the way to help us be more profitable.
Beyond legislation, maybe we should also look at our own responsibility, right? So I think that we as hoteliers, but a lot of the vendors as well, they're vendors that got certified, that have ISO status, that really take care and proof of their diligence there. So I think the legislation is necessary, but there is a part that we need to play as well, both the hoteliers and the vendors. And if we take that seriously enough, I don't think that legislation will obstruct us. We need to react maybe a little bit to it and guide to it, but there is a fiduciary responsibility that I think that we have towards our guests to make sure that their data is clean. And to Tarek's point, there are so many opportunities that we can offer the guest if they indicate better their persona as to why they travel and what they're doing on this particular case, that we can make their stay more enjoyable. Let's match that up with the appropriate permissions in order to get that flowing. So I think that we always look out as to what is happening to us. And as an industry, we just sit there and look, okay, what do we do next? We should take action, and there are great vendors, and there are some great companies that are taking care of that. So
and if I can add, there's also an owner element to that.
Sure.
Yeah. So, from an investment perspective.
Absolutely.
Right? So if there is awareness of legislation, if there is awareness of the impact, then from an owner perspective, there also has to be the awareness that the investment has a massive ROI, but it's also like buying an insurance policy, right? You hope you never have to use it, but in the event that you do, you feel good about it. So that's the other element.
And Derek, it's like the environment. Let's put a lead bulb in and yippee, we have taken care of the environment. No, take it seriously, own it. And that's what I miss sometimes, that we always look at everybody else but ourselves in order to take action on it. And I applaud those that have taken action and can actually prove it and show it.
I'd love to give a perspective on this from a global standpoint, and that is that the world, we've got many regions of the world and countries that have different requirements, right? Sometimes it's fiduciary, sometimes it's privacy. And so what that does is for all of our suppliers, and certainly our suppliers all realize this, we have to be able to isolate data in certain cases. And it flies into all the other things we're trying to do to have Guest 360 or to have efficient processes and so forth. Everything becomes so much more complicated when you've got to say, well, you really can't pull this information from this property because it's owned by the king, or you can't pull information from China because of China's security laws and so forth. So how do you isolate that? It's a whole lot easier to do it for China than it is for one property. But still, as you're architecting your systems, you got to say, okay, I just can't deliver that there, or I've got to have a system that's more complicated so that I can really handle those requirements. So, again, most of you are used to dealing with that. The thing that scares me is as we start looking at new technologies and generative AI and so forth, every country or every city might have a different rule because they haven't figured it out yet. I mean, as we know, everybody's trying to figure out, okay, what can you do and what can't you do? So how do we need to test, we need to pilot, we want to utilize some of these technologies, but if you spend, $10 million putting together the ultimate guest planner application, but you can only use it in Argentina, is it really worth it? And so anyway, it's going to be a really interesting world as we have more and more regulations in that area.
Thanks.
Just to piggyback off of the point about generative AI, that's sort of the 800-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to legislation. What's going to come? I think in the Caribbean, just like with GDPR, we're more likely to be impacted by legislation in our source markets, our big source markets in the US, Europe, and so on. One of the things we're looking to do at the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association is to come up with a generative AI best practice / policy document to inform our members. But we're just one region of the world, and I think it's very important that the private sector really lead in the hospitality industry on a global level, to make sure that we lead the conversation in terms of where we think AI should go, in terms of informing the policymakers on what the best practices should be. They may or may not listen to us, but we certainly need to make sure that they are informed, because if you allow certain policymakers who don't have an understanding of the industry to make the decisions for you, we may end up with things that really limit us and prevent us from taking full advantage, of AI, which of course comes with its risk, obviously. But sometimes the risk as perceived by the public sector may be a little bit overblown and may lead to legislation that really limits us and prevents us from taking full advantage of the opportunities of generative AI.
Well, just as a follow-up, I was reading about Focusrite, and they were talking about different segments and different populations, and how, for example, Americans and people from India tend to use a lot of the services. So are you, in your databases, are you looking at and using technology and saying, okay, we know this, we're creating these offers, and then trying to get other markets and replicate that information and use that information in your operations to give better services and sell more incremental revenue? Todd, did you?
Well, we certainly do that. We actually, because that information is so important, one of the things we had to do is figure out how to collect it appropriately. Back to the OTA issue and so forth, sometimes you're getting information about guests and you don't know who they are. And then what was happening in the property management system is we had, for some reason, we tended to have like 20% of the guests were from Algeria or something like that. And we were wondering, how is this happening? And it turned out that was the thing that popped up first on the window when you check somebody in on the PMS of the country of residence. and we weren't really measuring that at that level, and so people were just taking the easiest route. So one thing is trying to make sure you have the information, and so we put in policies and so forth to try to collect at every point, whether it's the website or and send the front desk staff to really find out where they're coming from, and then using it. We have a little bit. I'm kind of proud of one of our initiatives. It's not necessarily technology related, but specifically, we do not have properties in India. And we realize we have a lot of guests that come from India, and a lot of our guests that are coming from other parts of the world go to India. So we developed an old-fashioned partnership with Oberoi, who's a great brand in India, to really co-market. And so do some special offers for some of our top guests who are going to India to have a special trip to introduce them to Oberoi and vice versa.
Well, I think that the good thing is that our systems are so far lagging behind that we don't have to be worried about AI because we're not using it. And secondly, I think that really if you're able to get your data clean and have a digital engagement with your guests, then regenerative AI is fantastic because you can mass customize. And basically, we have gone from B2B to B2C, and now it is me to B. Right? So right. I, as a consumer, can decide everything. And I'm spoiled everywhere except in the hospitality industry, so we better wake up. So I don't think we have to be worried about legislation. Yes, it will impact us no matter what. But we have so much catching up to do in our own kitchen that let's focus there. And there is a lot of opportunity to use it. And yes, there are threats for sure. With every new development, there are threats, and we need to get used to it. But I'm sure that many panels many years ago, when the internet started to take off, everybody was looking at all the bears on the road, and yet today we're using it. Privacy, we're getting through it. So I think that we need to take a more opportunistic point of view at it and look at it. And I think that if there's one area in the world where they're taking a great look at it, is in the GCC. I mean, Tarek, you're right at the center of it. So, and there they take a complete different approach to it, yet with the same limitations, but they don't look at it as limitations, they just look at it as hurdles to be taken. So I would say let's look into it, but let's be realistic that today, 95% of our industry is incapable of doing anything with the technology that's coming out, so there's no threat for us.
So when it comes to targeting different markets, prior to the pandemic, the second largest source of arrivals into St. Lucia, a lot of people don't realize it was actually not Europe, it was actually the Caribbean itself. So Barbados, Martinique, Trinidad, that was a massive market. Still is, it's now third, hasn't quite recovered due to airlift issues in the region. But, you know, working with your CVB or tourism authority to get data is very important. And, you know, really understanding what travelers coming from that region are looking for. So the Caribbean traveler is very different from the US traveler. They're much more adventurous. They like to go out into the community. They like to do shopping and eat out a lot as opposed to going for all-inclusive. So for at least 10 to 15 years, we've had geofence rates that target that. But we also use, and there are a lot of apps, I'm not like fronting for any one vendor, but we use Triptease to really have targeted messages to those persons that really let them know what's happening, for example, in the location. St. Lucia's busiest month in terms of arrivals in its history was actually July 2019, and that was due to our carnival, which, you know, if you're based in Toronto, that's, I wouldn't say it's like Caribana, it's much bigger than Caribana for us. But it was actually our busiest month, and a lot of that was due to regional traffic. So we definitely make sure that we target offers and information and events to persons who are from different ones. And there are a lot of different you know, tools that you can use out there to market to people differently. And it's very important, even in the representation in the ads as well, is very critical, because obviously when people are being shown these ads, they want to see themselves, so to speak, in the ads. So yes, we definitely do quite a bit of that, both at our hotel level and also at a destination level when it comes to targeting people from different parts of the world.
So if I can just add, because it's a good point you bring up, and you know, Michael, you mentioned the GCC, and the typical understanding is that, oh, it's the Middle East, it's the Gulf, it all functions on oil. But that's not the case. And so, for example, when you look at Dubai and Dubai tourism, one of the big things that they realized early on is that hospitality and tourism in general is a massive part of the GDP. And so what they've done is they've actively, let's say, partnered with the hotel chains to say, here's the data, here's the traveler, here's what we have, here's what it looks like. This is, you know, these are the source markets. This is where you can focus. So they're actually engaging with the companies for us to be able to target the right source markets, to keep bringing people in, but also understand where we need to do better. And so this is a very interesting example of where government can play a big role in destination marketing as well.
Yeah, and I think that if you see that they're not trying to get up to the latest that is out there, they set the horizon at 2050. They say, okay, what is going to happen then, and how do we prepare ourselves, and how do we have governance in place in order to each time up our game as we get to it. But indeed, it is very inclusive. It is very much an open source thinking, if you want to make that match. And I think that what I like best, there is a nice balance and initiative that comes from the private sector and from the government. And they assist each other. It's one of inclusion, and it's one of sharing. So I think that a lot of areas in the world can take a good example of that. And they're really making progress. And it's quite amazing if you see with the willingness and the knowledge available that what they're accomplishing.
Well, let's see if we can spice things up just a notch. Yesterday, we had a panel discussion talking about partnerships with our suppliers and the hotel companies and the operators and the franchisees and whatnot. And the question was asked, why is it that hoteliers are not designing property management systems, but that people who've never worked the front desk were. And so for the panelists, the question that I would ask, and I'm sure that our supporters here and our partners would like to hear it, is what should we be doing with them to ensure a better guest experience for the future? You know, if you had the white chalkboard, what should we do? How should we approach it?
I'll take a stab. So to answer your question in terms of owner-operators or people who sit at the front desk and organizing it, I think it's our industry's late to adopt. And we're always looking for the next best thing, right, in terms of how to increase that revenue. So, and last year in Orlando, we were talking about a couple of these items. One of the key things is that I noticed is, for example, when you enter a vehicle, you're looking for navigation, right? And so you have your phone. There's Android and there's Apple. Our systems are not open source. What we got basically, imagine if each automobile manufacturer had their own way to navigate, and you can only use their form of navigation, right? So are you going to buy the car, the vehicle? You know, like you might have 2 or 3 brands vehicles in your garage. So when we were talking about this, the key way forward really is the squeaky wheel gets the oil. It's got to be us owners and operators and even front desk staff saying we need a better system, because when asked whether it's Marriott, whether it's Hilton, whether it's any of the brands, you know, can't you just take the app and flip it around, right? It's got to be simpler for the front desk operator, because then they can concentrate on the other things, touch points, right? Because, you know, like, and the millennial and the age factor is going to come up to a thing too. Go to like I've been to any fast food restaurant like McDonald's, you have a huge sort of iPad, which a big iPhone, versus somebody standing right there, right? I would go to somebody standing right there. Most other people now are adopting that big thing, right? Now, in that app, can I slide the food this way or this way? Can I select my room? Can I select where I'm going to go? And then, boom, and move on. And so if that's the future, are we planning for that? Because not everybody wants that, but the ones that do want that. And again, you know, there's luxury market, the mid-scale market, and all that. So, you know, first of all, it's great to have forums like this. It's great to have people who want the future to be less hassle. And so how do we make sure that the brand change are really going to have to help lead the way, right? And not having open source is really difficult. And they admit they're not technology companies. They're really travel hospitality companies. So let technology lead the way in the way it should, which is open source.
Frank, I would answer that, first of all, I want to shout out to all the vendors and applaud them for all the initiatives they've been taking for all the years in providing us with amazing technology. If you start, I'm part of an owner-operator, it starts with us having a better understanding of the systems. And I've often seen that if there is any smarts on technology within organizations, there is a need to have CIO knowledge, how to manage and how to envision everything and architecturally, but there's also a need for CTO knowledge. And it's that combustion that we need to have available to articulate what it is that we need as operators to the vendors in order to have a closer working relationship. Early on, when we started with the company that I helped found, we worked with a lot of vendors and had that dialogue. And together, we did some great stuff. And I believe that the dialogue is very important, and it's not necessarily always a vendor, client relationship, but it needs to go beyond that. There needs to be building. Last that I want to say about that, we need to understand that we have sort of come into an age of SaaS, and we need to understand that we as an industry should stop asking for customization on everything because we do it a little bit different than the next one. We don't. It's just our lack of understanding and inability to understand how to use great SaaS systems that prohibit us from looking at what we really should look at is changing our own business processes. So what can we buy in the market out there that allows us to change our business models? And our business processes deal with, heavy on staff. Technology can enable so many things. It can also take loads off our staff that we have there for better person-to-person engagement. So we need to take a little bit of a different look, again, from the hotelier, work with the vendors, and I would say the better you do that, the better outcome there is. But stop thinking that we're so special that we need everything bespoke. We're in a world of SaaS, and guess what? All the airlines use the same systems also. All the retailers use the same systems also. They just are able, by branding and by articulating what it is that they want to do, and it's smart thinking that I believe needs to go into that.
If I can add, so I think, the first thing that I would agree with is the fact that, or to complement, is that certain systems are no longer meant to be built in-house by hotel companies, right? So off the shelf, that's the way to go. To your question about, building systems and solutions by hoteliers, I think, and I'm going to keep it short just to make sure I don't overstep or shoot myself in the foot, but I think the key that I've seen, and if I can make it even more generic, is that you have a lot of systems that have been built by hoteliers, and I think where we face a hurdle is the element of growth. So you've got, of course, you're running a business, you're providing a service to hotels, and then you need growth. And I think where we lose out with the vendors, the partners, is that when we lose sight of where it was started or what was the purpose versus the growth, I think that is where we lose our way. And it leads to the customizations, it leads to the dilution of a product, and then it's no longer viable anymore. And so I think we need, my 2 cents personally would be, is to stay the course and build a solution that is quote unquote bulletproof, so that you actually have something that the industry trusts and, will get adopted. But it takes time. It's not an overnight thing.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I think what we do need to acknowledge is it's a very complicated system. It's not easy. I've worked with companies where we did give it a shot to develop our own PMS. We have a lot of colleagues from Starwood there. We kind of ran it for multiple years, but we realized it's like a bottomless hole, right? You keep investing into the system, the number of interfaces required, the integrations required. It's a very, very tough ship to keep afloat. So it's no, kind of straight answer or a single line solution wherein either just the hoteliers can build a bulletproof system. You do need the technical expertise. And I think for the large players, the challenge is the volumes. When you look at the big players in the game, when they do the distribution of what hospitality brings in terms of numbers, it's a minuscule single-digit number for them. So, but it's good to see. I think we'll see a lot more on the shop floor today with the new players coming in, the startups coming in. That's the answer. Somebody just cracking that code, making the systems light and focus on the expertise, and then allow that system to integrate with many other systems which the hotels can use. I think that's the key. Otherwise, for one player to do all in one application, it's never going to be bulletproof. That's my take.
So we talked a lot about the guest experience, but if we could move a bit back, Tariq, you talked about the room, our connection to the internet, but in 5 years, how do you see the room itself? The guest spends a good amount of their time in the room. How do you see that technology changing?
So I think, it comes back to the basics, right? We try and do, in my opinion, in some cases, we try and do a little bit too much. And I'll keep going back to the statement, it must work, because there's nothing worse than putting technology into a room that does not work. So, we've got both ends of the spectrum where you say within a luxury hotel room, you have an experience whereby you walk into the room, there's 13 sensors, there is not only the typical, light scene when you enter a room and the temperature control, but there's now even a scent machine that actually delivers a certain scent for X amount of minutes, just to kind of build that welcome brand attachment and feeling. But what happens if the guest is actually, opposed to that scent? Do you give options? How many options do you give? So I think we run a fine line between making it work, and if you're giving me a scent machine but I can't connect to the internet, I don't want anything. I'd rather have the internet, right? So I think this is where, when we focus on the guest room of the future, everyone's putting, all these like touch screens and mirror TVs that come up, and, I can touch here and do this, but is my internet working? Can I get online? Can I cast my Netflix to the TV, or will the TV just stay off for the duration of my stay? Because it is becoming a panel. That's all it is, right? All of these things need to be considered, and I think in some way we're actually taking the guest room of the future back into a more simplistic design than a complicated one.
I'm 100% opposite. I said, bring it on.
I had a feeling.
Bring it in, do the most incredible stuff, because that's where it's going everywhere. I don't see a car being manufactured only with 2 buttons, because otherwise it's too confusing and we cannot make the 3rd button work. It's on us to make it work. Bring it on. I'm involved with a great project in KSA, and future thinking there is going wild. And that room is going to go on steroids. And it's going to bring in a lot of things that we see in different verticals. And I think, will all guests use all features? Absolutely not. But when we started out, early on, bringing in a lot of features in the rooms, people loved it. They played with it, and that we have malfunctions. We caught it with our middleware, but yeah, we had some issues, and then they're there to be fixed. But I think that if we don't have aspiration, if we don't dream, if we don't go for the stars, then we will never get there. If we do it defensively, because then we can make it work. It doesn't work for me, and especially when you need to bring owners along, especially when you need to, bring so many constituencies together. Let's aim for the moon. Let's go for it.
Absolutely, but as long as it works.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Listen, it is only technology if it doesn't work, so we should not talk about technology, right?
It's true.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you're going to see, especially with AI, is hyper-personalization of the guest experience. That has to be where it goes. So you might have some guests who want unplugged. They may not even want a television in their room. The question is, and there are some our most expensive hotel rooms in St. Lucia don't have a television in there. They have great Wi-Fi though. I've stayed at some of them. It was a dirty little secret. They don't advertise that they have it, but they actually do have it. So I think that that's one thing that is going to happen. And I often have this argument with my IT people. I'm like, do we really need, again, maybe some hotels in this part of the world have already moved away from it. I always say, do we really think that we're going to have telephones and cable television in the rooms in the next 5 to 10 years? I know some places have already moved away from at least one of these things, because Generation Z is going to be our main source markets in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And they think differently, they communicate differently. The ability to instant messaging. I mean, if you don't have some sort of messaging app already that allows guests to communicate with you that way, you need to get to that, because that is how people are going to want to communicate. But that doesn't mean that they're going to want to lose that human element. I think that you've already seen videos of hotels in other parts of the world that have a robot that does everything for you. But I remember watching one of those videos, and what struck me was how the person, the traveler, who was actually from Generation Z, said at the end that they feel so alone because they had not interacted with a human. So we do have to remember that we're still in the hospitality business. Hyper-personalization, yes, but that human element is going to be very, very important. That people are still going to want to interact with human beings for certain things, right? But we definitely need to take that into account, hyper-personalization, and it's going to be very different for different properties, different market segments, luxury versus budget hotels, etc.
There you go. Where you want to go? Oh, it's my turn. Okay. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about partnerships. We talked a little bit about what's going to be out there in the future. Without the common AI, what is the coolest technology that you've seen or heard about somebody testing that you can talk about?
Coolest technology I've seen recently, Detroit Airport, once you go through the portal, we're used to seeing a leaderboard, right? All the flights and all that. Customizes just for you. And so I think that maybe that portends what's going to happen in the future in the hospitality business, but basically, are we going to adopt the facial recognition technology to say, this is going to customize the experience? So even when you could, walking down on the floor, this is, like Star Trek, Star Wars stuff, where it guides you exactly where you need to go, because these are your preferences, right? And your preferences are on your phone, so you own it, but that's the technology I saw at the airport that Delta rolled out.
I think the coolest one we saw off late, of course, the whole noise about ChatGPT and NLP. The way you can actually see the use cases of it. It's both exciting and scary at the same time. But yeah, exciting because I think globally across the hotel chain, the kind of manpower shortage and the quality of staff which you get, so to overcome that, down to the minimums of like taking a room service order and stuff like that, both on text and voice. I think that's a reality, and we've seen it in action. And the conversion, the rate at which it's closing that loop, it's extremely encouraging. So that I think is a very, very promising one for us.
I think immersive technology with the Apple Vision Pro coming out, it certainly generated a lot of interest and vision of what's possible, pardon the pun. But one of the things that we were approached by a company and they said, hey, we'll go out and we'll video your, create an immersive video of your properties. We were like, well, we can do that anywhere. But what this company was doing is actually creating camera technology, 360 camera technology, to really capture the moment in 360 and move from place to place. So it is so much more immersive, and you actually get a feel for the experience, not just a look at the place. And that combination seems like it will be something that will be very interesting. They're looking at selling, for sale for events, selling event space. But I can imagine as we're looking at, doing things with different experiences for our guests while they're on property, they might come and experience and say, oh, okay, I want to do this parasail thing or this, because this is amazing. So the ability to inspire and sell more and through augmented or virtual and virtual environment and immersive experiences, I think will be something that seems very interesting.
For me, Frank, there's always the nice and the latest glitter up front, but what I've been impressed with is what can be done today with clean data, what can be done with, behind the scenes, and what we really can get ready to action for our guests. And the discussion, what should we have with technology and what should be done by humans, the humans will always be there, but let's make it a choice and let's facilitate as much as we can with technology. Also, the margins in our industry keep on creeping up on us, and we need to become more efficient and smarter in adapting our business processes and following the guest. And I think that that's where we lag behind. We really do not have an understanding of what the guest is all willing to do. During COVID, we saw great examples of us being able to, make some headway with that and change some services. And then the minute COVID was over, everybody went back to, the way it was before. And so I think we need a mind shift, but what is happening behind the scenes is exciting me more than the glitter up front.
So, Frank, the most exciting technology, I'm going to take a different approach. I'm going to talk about what I have not seen yet. You would have thought by now, especially when you're talking about addressing pain points in international travel, and maybe somewhere in the world is already doing it, I'm not aware of it, you would have thought by now that with advanced biometrics and AI, that we could make the whole security process so much easier. Use AI to really determine traveler intent, which is really what it's all about. The reason that they make us take off our shoes and our belt is because they're not sure who we are and what our intent is or if we're unsafe. you would have thought, although you have to be careful because AI might give you a false positive as well. But the technology is getting there, and that's probably that's something that would impress me a lot, because that's certainly one of my biggest pain points, having to get through airport security. It takes so long, and it aggravates you as a traveler, perhaps before you even get there. So if anyone has seen it anywhere in the world, I'd love to know, because that probably is the future. You're talking about screens that are personalized for you. That's great, but I think the airport security one is one that would be very impressive if and when it comes.
I think from my perspective, staying away from the whole AI topic, I think what I'm most interested to see is how, with facial recognition, we'll be able to take that guest, personalization to the next level. I think that is something that I think needs to be focused on a little bit. And it may be that the technology is there, but we as brands need to focus on it more. But I think that is something that has been around for a little bit now and is kind of reaching that adoption point, or could be pushed over the edge. And I think that is something that would be a bit of a game changer as well from a personalization perspective.
Well, yeah, even, last year, we had the updates from Doug Rice on the guest information, and really the guest holding their information in their own wallet. And I know that's sort of counterintuitive to a lot of people on stage, because you guys want all the data. But in theory, if they are your customer, you will have that data.
Right.
You just have to acquire the.
And it might be more accurate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's very exciting from a future standpoint, to have that technology in place. We haven't talked too much about sustainability or that type of technology, bringing in the eco part to your hotels. Do you have anything to add? I know a few of you have, honey on the roof and wonderful things like that, which also appeal to customers. But anything else you can offer us?
So I can take that to start off with. One of the things that we're doing at our core, for example, is we've partnered up with a company on the smart thermostat topic, right? And the key here is that what they've done is actually quite cool, in the sense that it is a retrofit, which works with pretty much every kind of scenario you could think of. And so what we're doing now is we're actually partnering up and doing it as more of an OpEx model to get it, digestible, so to speak, and essentially rolling that out to all our hotels that didn't have this before. And it's a small switch. It's done in under 20 minutes, just, for the most part, as a generalization, without complication. But the returns when it comes to sustainability and the environment and what you can achieve out of that, it's better than what they had before, which was nothing, right? From a guest room management perspective. And the fact that it doesn't cost an arm and a leg is even better, because it's then even more enticing to say, let's move forward in that direction, but you don't have to, fork out a bunch of cash for it as well.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, since at ITC we invested a lot on sustainability. I think a lot of investment has been made at the back end in terms of your water treatment plants, et cetera, so on and so forth. And how we are approaching that differently using tech is to educate our guests about the same. How much carbon points you stayed during your stay, et cetera. So we are trying to incorporate that information, so when they check out on the invoice, it states that during your stay you saved so many carbon points by staying with us. So those are kind of differentiating factors we are trying to bake in using tech, bridging that gap between the back-end technology, what's been already put in place, and informing the customer just by increasing that thermostat by 1 degree, how many carbon points you can save. So we are working on those lines to bridge that gap with the customers.
I'm working with Nick Price on a project in Saudi, whereby everything is built, and actually the life cycle of the building is the very essence of the environment and the savings that come along with it. So it's sensored up to the gazoo. It really becomes smart buildings to the extent that buildings can be smart today. And I think that if you realize how much new construction in the rest of the world and all over the place is going in without any attention to that, it's brutal. So there are areas where it really is being focused on, and I think it starts during the construction phase or the design phase. There is a opportunity for retrofitting. It's a complete different look at it. But if you take environment serious, I think that there's a lot of things that can be done. But ESG is not only a tech investment. ESG, like you say, it's also a human investment, and it's a full circle. But ESG is either taken on or not, and it's something that you need to believe in, not to achieve anything towards your guest or towards regulatory. It's just something that you need to believe in as an owner, because it takes investment. There are returns, but I think that is not why you do it. So in new build, it's a must. In retrofit, it can be done. And I think if we do not, weave it into what it is that we're doing, we're stealing from our future, from our pockets. And last but not least, the guest really, is eager. So they will listen, and they will figure out who are doing better and not.
Yeah, I'd like to bring one up. It's just because it's so different that we just started working with a company called Winnow Solutions, our F&B team. And what they do is they have a camera that takes pictures of food waste, both in the kitchen and then back from the guest. And they've got AI that can do a really good job of measuring how much food waste you have every day. And so the idea is what you measure, you can fix. And they've had great results of just, we're throwing away this all the time, so maybe we shouldn't cook as much. Or the guest isn't eating this as much, so maybe we should serve something different. But it's just a really innovative way of utilizing technology, because there's not that many ways you can just add technology on top of things that are already there to make a difference. And this is a really interesting idea.
From a sustainability standpoint, taking a slightly different approach, but still related to what you just said. One of the things that customers coming to the Caribbean are very concerned about is food miles, and are you sourcing your food locally?
Right.
So we import a lot in St. Lucia, and a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the produce that you're seeing is imported. And many years ago, we started an initiative in St. Lucia that has been done in other islands. I think Jamaica's done a very good job of that. But we started in St. Lucia a virtual agricultural clearinghouse that connected farmers to hoteliers and restaurants. It's had very good success and has really, it's connected the hoteliers to about 1,000 different farmers all around the island. And that has already allowed us to reduce our food import bill dramatically. Because it's interesting. You think on an island, tropical, you've got all of these fruits all the time. But the problem is that it's a knowledge gap. It's bridging that knowledge gap. The farmers don't necessarily know what we need, and we don't know what they have.
Right.
So really, that's something that's very important and becoming very critical to the traveler today. With Gen Z as well, they're very concerned about that. Where is this food from? Where was it sourced? Or is it organic or whatever? So that's becoming very, very important. And it's a part of sustainability, I think, that we don't often think about. And we often think about ways to reduce our energy bill, or ways to reduce our carbon footprint, or ways to reduce our water consumption. But the food miles is a very, very important one, and something that we've done successfully in St. Lucia.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, definitely. Whole Foods have been doing that for 15 years. This only came from 10 miles. So yeah, that's great.
Okay, we have just a few more minutes. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to add that they haven't shared with the audience? Any parting words of advice? Anything they should see on the floor without mentioning vendors?
I've got one quick thing. We talked about, as we were preparing for this, what is the ultimate experience, and how can we really utilize technology to make the biggest difference? And I've got a lot of things I'd love to share about that and what we do, but I'd ask you just to think about what was the best experience you ever had from a travel standpoint, and how did that happen? Who was involved? What did they do to help? And whether it's in the inspiration and talking to friends and researching, or in actually booking the trip and activities and taking care of things, as they went, a luxury travel agent does a lot of that in some cases, but who are those people? What did they do? And how can we do that for our guests going forward so they can have that best experience every time? And it's going to be different for different guests, and they're going to want different things.
My advice is be bold with what you do towards the future with your technology. And there are some great systems out there today that really bring you to digital engagement, to having meaningful processes for the guest, provide a lot of data and information for yourself to manage and change your business process, become more effective. I believe that we can find a million reasons why not to, but I think we need to completely take a different approach and say why we should. And then in the process that you look out there for your vendors, I would say that vendors should be able to give examples of companies that they have achieved with what it is that they're selling, and listen obviously to the vendor. Buy the SaaS, don't try to do too many things yourself, although there's always, that option with open source to do some things. But, listen to those users of those, hoteliers and companies that are mavericks that are making it happen, and make the quantum leap and take an outside company to untangle the spaghetti that we've created in workarounds and just do it. Stop delaying it because you're stealing of your pocket. So it's a bite that you need to take. And, for operators, bring your owners with you because it's something that is needed. And I would say this is the most incredible tech show that brings everything to the floor. So go and enjoy and be bold.
To your point, enjoy the trade show. Make sure you do go there. Look, listen to your guests, listen to your client. As a leader here and as you are here on the floor, be informed, be prepared, be connected, because that's really going to be important as we go into this next decade. And that's what I would say.
I would say this is the second time that I'm attending HITEC. I attended last year in Orlando. The trade show is great. Looking at the topic of this session, future-proofing your business, I think be prepared to ask the vendors how they are future-proofing themselves. Because I know AI we're getting tired of hearing it. It's going to affect all of them. And you have to ask them, just as you ask them about their ability to adapt to the cloud or to adapt to mobile technology, you have to be willing to ask them, what are they going to look like and what are they doing themselves to get ready for the impact of generative AI. And also, in terms of assessing technology, I'm a finance person, so that's my background. Don't just look at the upfront cost, look at the ROI, obviously, in terms of increased guest satisfaction, increased revenue, reduced costs, but also be very focused on how it impacts employee engagement or affects your employees in terms of their productivity. It's not always easy to measure that, but if something is going to reduce the pain points for your employees and allow you to retain the employees because you have technology that makes their job easier and faster and more enjoyable, that's something that's very important because right now it's easier to attract new customers than it is to attract and retain the best employees in the industry right now.
My suggestion is I think there's so much to see. It's impossible to pack in 3 days. And the approach we are going to take is going to spend more time in booths in understanding tech, which are our typical pain points, in our day-to-day operations back in our hotel chain, and also what the game-changing trends are. So those two are going to be focus areas for us, and that's what I would like to suggest to all. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'll close it off then. To the vendor community that's here, first of all, thank you for showing up because it gives us a chance to actually see what's out there. I would actually say that, let's continue to take that approach of a partnering model as opposed to a supplier and buyer kind of a model, because that's where the value is. And the last thing I'd say is thank you to all of you for listening to us ramble on for an hour and a half, and I hope we provided some value.
Yes, thank you very much for being here. And the show opens now.